Okay, for people joining this live stream, we are doing a design review for some future functionality in Wolfram language related to interactivity of graphics. So let's get started here.
Right. So this is, a lot of stuff that we've had before, but it didn't
Which I
really.
don't particularly like. Let me tell you that. I personally, the fact that there's dynamics here and the killer feature of the fact that I get that dynamic warning when I get a notebook with these things in it, that's killer. And we got to fix that.
Yep.
But I don't think that's. I mean, that's the notebook issue.
Well,
No,
I mean, there's
it's
stuff
not.
that.
It's not. We can look personally. I don't really care about this little whisper of interactivity, but I do care about the fact that it's slow and it generates that dynamic content warning. Am I making sense? So, I mean,
I will point out that you haven't hit a dynamic content warning yet.
that is an interesting point.
I mean, you very well might by the time we get to the end of the notebook, but it's not.
Well, there we
Okay,
go. There we go. So what? Why? That shouldn't happen.
Trading chart will be hard to do.
No.
I mean, trading chart
isn't. Look. Listen. The thing is, you need to work. Who's project managing here? First question.
I'm in charge of this, and
then you need to work with John on the question of how we sign these things, so that if you generated the thing yourself, it does not come up with a dynamic warning, or that we carve out some kind of sandbox for dynamic features that are in our own visualization capabilities. Right?
And trading chart is big and old and hasn't been updated, with everything. It has, and so
I'm aware. But what I'm saying is that the design criterion has to be that the best case is we can sign our own visualization generated things, right? That we know we generated this dynamic content. Therefore, we can sign it and the front end can run it without a dynamic warning. Am I making sense? That's different from a user generated dynamic content, which could have all kinds of malicious stuff in it.
Right.
Okay. So our stuff has to be signable, and you need to work with John to figure out how that works.
Yep.
Okay. Now, all right. So, I mean, great. What are you showing here?
So the focus of this section was, we have had things that have interactions,
right?
But we haven't had any control over them.
Yeah, I know, and I'm not that keen on. I mean, they're okay,
exactly.
But they're nothing special, and the fact that these are default tooltips is also rather ugly. I mean, this is amusing, but
but anyways, but the other part of it is that we want the design to be able to encompass things that, these, sort of previous iterations where it was baked in and you had no control over it. But also, this is sort of useful because it gives us a set of examples of what we want to aspire to, of things that we want the design to be able to cover. And so,
yeah, well, right, this thing here is important. Yep. Okay. Okay, so now what am I doing next?
I would click the open button, and it should take you to test. And
okay, we have people from the cloud team here, right?
We have Matt. John wasn't able to make it, but we have Matt Adams.
Okay.
And so now you can open
this one here. What's it doing? Okay, so first question is, why was there no preview image there?
Matt and I were discussing that before you got
we'll have
here.
to look into that. I don't know why there isn't a cache.
Okay.
And so the examples I have here have a couple of things and a couple of different methods. So one is what I'm calling a ball highlighter, which is it's basically tracking
But
on the
this
content.
state isn't good, right? So I'm off the curve, but I kind of would still expect there to be. I mean, like if I go to that trading chart, for example, right, and I
Mhm.
go here, I've still got something, even though I'm way off the curve.
Right. And so there's an example with that farther down.
Okay, but I think that here, yeah, this is very weird. What happens here? Okay.
Is it less weird in this case, or?
See, I might not even know that this had. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, I'm one of those people who, as I'm reading text, will take my mouse and select things, just not.
I'm not one of those people.
I'm
really not.
Not for any purpose, but so I just sort of inherently.
That's weird. When you have multiple things within the mouse domain.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It's not a crazy thing to do, I don't think.
It's not crazy, but I don't think it should be the default.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know what you do in this case. Honestly, I think it's less annoying than picking one and not being able to find the others.
True. Of not having enough granularity rather than.
Now, I don't quite understand. I mean, there are clearly other things you want to be able to do, like a flag that tells you the coordinates and things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Double highlighting, slice highlighting.
So I think this is a little bit closer to what you were talking about a minute ago.
Although there's a compromise here, which is to be in the so the question is, are you dropping a vertical or are you picking up a horizontal here? Because either way, you could be. Did you get what I'm saying? If you're doing the slice thing, you could either be vertical slicing or horizontal slicing.
Correct.
And you could also do both.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, given this particular point in 2D, it defines a double slice, so to speak. That might look too weird. I don't know whether that's possible.
I mean, it might look too weird, and I'm not sure if Matt's framework is up to that at the moment.
That's cool, what that does. That's nice. Actually, surprisingly useful.
The next one is the one that impresses me because I didn't specifically aim to do anything for it. I was expecting this to break, to be honest.
Yeah, okay, well, that's nice.
And so this is with the crosshairs turned off.
Why would we care? I mean, unless it has a flag saying what the coordinates are, why would we care about this one? Other than just like it's a it makes it twinkle, it makes it seem like it isn't completely dead.
Mm-hmm.
Why isn't it crosshairing from that position?
I'm not sure.
Oh, I see. It crosshairs from the position, so it's snapping to the points, and it's crosshairing from the position of the point.
Right. And I think we need a form that's just complete freeform crosshair.
You mean independent of the points?
Independent of the points or the curve or whatever. It's just a
right. Well,
crosshair
there's the
following your
possibility of a
mouse.
crosshair that is labeled and that snaps to points. So I'm saying you get near a point and the crosshair snaps right onto the point.
So a free form, but that snaps when you get close enough.
Right, but let's zoom out a little bit. What are we? Okay, so we've got these, and now what else do we have here? What is this?
What is which?
Oh, these things, documentation notebooks.
So those are documentation notebooks I've started to write.
Are they in? Do I need to?
Do a quick CVS update.
Okay. Okay. Oh, this is interesting. So highlighting is a wrapper like labeling.
Like labeled or call out or
Yeah, right.
tooltip, etc.
Okay. But let's just understand. I mean, I assume you've looked at endless other examples, so you know what else exists out there, right?
Right, and there's a lot of stuff out there, and yeah, some of it gets misused, and some of it is used well, and
Okay, but I mean, in terms of basic capabilities, this crosshairing. I mean, the other thing I've seen is highlighting a curve, right?
right,
Curve folds up.
right, and we saw that with the parallel axis plots.
Yes, I
when we were looking at the desktop.
I did see that, and that's nice.
And it's really important there.
Sure, it's kind of useless. Right, I think it's important for all of these plots.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a complicated issue. Who do we have it? We have people from UX here because that's relevant, right?
I don't think we have any UX people.
So we should have done.
Yeah.
Because and I guess for a repeat of this, we need probably Noah, Path.
I keep forgetting Parth is UX now.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, but I think what's important here is kind of the receptive fields for these curves, right? We need a theory of those. Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, so in other words,
receptive.
Well, I mean the hit zones, whatever.
Okay, right. What?
Roger, do you have comments on this?
Yeah. I mean, we've done several, but largely it's sort of the distance to the curve, which is the shortest path to the curve.
Are you sure? I mean, in other words, the issue here is given that I'm at this point, right? Mm-hmm. So I've got several things going on, right?
Yeah.
Let's say I've got. I mean, in general, we have to think about, 0-dimensional, 1-dimensional, 2-dimensional, etc. structures in a graphic.
Yep.
Right. And you have got, for the time being, and again, we don't have people from UI group here, but for the time being, we've got a single point, a mouse position, right? And a hovered mouse position. And the question is, for the set of 0, 1, 2-dimensional objects in the picture, which ones are thought to be related to that mouse position? Am I making sense?
If you wanted a single thing to light up, why would you not pick the closest one?
You might want something on the vertical direction. You might want something where it lights up.
Fine. But then that's okay, because you can. That's just a constraint. That's saying that.
Well, I don't know if that's the right way to think about it, because you might want here. You might want the vertically closest here. You might want the horizontally closest. You might want that curve to light up. I don't know. You might want a horizontal crosshair, except it isn't a crosshair. It's just a horizontal hair, and where it intersects with this first curve or with multiple curves, right? But so I think there needs to be the point I was going to make is the world of a single hover point is not necessarily the only world we need to support. because there's also multi-touch, which we're not doing much with right now. I don't know how successful multi-touch has been. Does anybody know? Again, we needed, this should have been arranged with UX people here.
I mean, there's like a whole iPad ecology and smartphones. Yeah, so I would say it's been successful.
Well, wait a second. Pinch zoom is successful.
That
Right?
whole thing is called multi-touch.
Look,
Yeah.
look. You know what I'm talking about. Multi-touch is not just pinch zoom. Multi-touch is, for example,
It's more than you have more than one touch.
indeed. But for example, in some of the touch press, ebooks, right? Teo had experimented with like 10 touch things, right?
Oh,
Where you have like the molecules app that he made. You actually can put your fingers down in many places, and it's sensing all of those places and doing something with them.
okay.
Am I making
I mean,
sense?
I suspect the case is that anything more than 2-touch breaks down
Yeah.
quickly, because
And Apple even experimented with some extended language beyond that. I don't think people remember it.
No, I agree. It's like 3-fingered, stuff on trackpads and so on is sort of at the limit, I think.
well, I mean, I think what the limit is not necessarily how many things are touching, but if you have 4 fingers on your touchpad, the constraints that puts on the motions that your hand can do. And
I
so
don't entirely buy that. I think that, for example, I think object manipulation. Let's see if I can find one here. See if I have this. Okay, let's see. Let me see if I can actually do this. Hold on one second.
yeah, I mean, my analogy is sort of playing Twister with your fingers.
I'm trying to think how I do this. I have an iPad connected to this device, but if I use the sidecar mechanism, how can I do this?
You're just trying to show the screen?
I'm trying to share the screen of the iPad.
I think you can do it with QuickTime, but I'm not positive.
Oh, I mean, usually I use the iPad as an extended desktop for my main computer. Right, and so that's
So do you use it for drawing?
no, I have a separate thing, this remarkable tablet, which I'm using for drawing.
Okay.
I use it because I can put it on a something in front of my main monitors so that I can use it for video conferencing. That's its main use. Does that make any sense? You understand what I'm talking about?
Maybe.
Right, because it is optionally puttable in front of my main computer screens. Let's see if I can do this here. Okay, let me see what I've got here. So that I can be looking at the iPad rather than looking off into some weird direction on the screen.
Right.
There we go. Incredibly high tech. All right, let's see if I can get it to focus. How could it not be focusing? Crazy. Okay, well, anyway, let's go find a molecule here. I don't know which molecules. Let's see one of these. Now, I think, where are they? Oh, actually, maybe I need to go back to the molecule gallery. No. Gallery of molecules. There we go. Can you see this? Oh, gosh, it looks terrible.
The molecules are blown out, but we can see it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Why is that happening? Let me just think. Why is that happening? That's not useful. Sigh. Okay, hold on. I've got a solution for this. So, what's that?
I just like that you've got a solution for everything.
Well, I'm going to try. Let's see. My idea is if we move this over here and we put a piece of white paper there, this is really a hacky solution, but you see what I'm
It's
trying
getting
to do.
better.
It's getting better, right?
Is it an iPad above it too?
No. What do you mean above it? That's a camera. That's the camera.
Oh,
You're
okay.
seeing
The big
reflection.
rectangle?
Yeah, the big rectangle is the camera, which
Interesting.
has a okay, well, whatever. I can make the molecule there. Now I've got the molecule.
It's a beautiful molecule.
Okay, so now look at this. I can use, well, I don't know what difference it really makes, but my molecule, what the heck? See, look. If I take those two, can you see that? It's turning, I don't know why the molecule doesn't get, I guess the molecule just intrinsically.
They light up and
They light up, but I can use multiple touch points here. I don't know why I'd want to. I mean, like here, the heck. Well, maybe that's just a different. Let's see if I can get to a different molecule. Maybe I need a bigger molecule.
The multi-touch I've enjoyed the most is GarageBand on my phone. I can like play chords on the keyboard, and it's actually like pretty nice to like make songs.
I see. Yeah, that's a good application. I mean, keyboards have had multi-touch for keyboards like pianos have had multi-touch for a long time. But okay, so this is a case where, okay, so my basic thesis about this is multi-touch other than for pinch zoom is a flop. And this doesn't even support pinch zoom because it's trying to support multi-touch where I can put, where I can play some kind of crazy chord in this molecule. I mean, it's amusing, but I don't.
I was gonna say it's getting really active now.
Right. Well, okay. Well, in any case.
Yeah, I mean, I think the exception to your more than two multi-touch is a flop. Is the exception where, like Matt's example with playing a chord, where you're using multi-touch, but overall it's a gross hand movement. It's
well,
not.
No, a keyboard is a one-dimensional thing, and our fingers are arranged sort of one-dimensionally.
Yes.
There are also the two-dimensional inputs on that. You can like if you're sort of DJing, you can like play a chord and then slide your finger, and like the x-axis might be repeating the chord, and the y-axis might be a audio filter of some sort, and so you can like slide around artistic.
Okay, but DJing is the extreme case of kind of multi.
Yeah, I'm not.
But it also
to
takes a long time for people to learn to play chords and things, like on a guitar or a keyboard. I mean, they spend years on that, right? So it's a skill you don't immediately have.
I don't know. Chords are not that big a deal I mean, well, whatever. But okay, my point here is the theory that we're dealing with here has to be, it's a theory of you have a single point, perhaps 2 points, but probably we're just dealing with pinch zoom. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the first order theory is a single point. And then the question is, what are we highlighting based on, we hit somewhere, we've got this graphic, what do we highlight?
Right. And so the stuff that they have in cloud is sort of very nice for this. And in that we can say, basically which axes are we looking at things in? And so,
Oh, so where is the design for the cloud? Is that the design? So this is, wait a minute, this is highlighted. This is the old highlighted now.
that is the old highlighted a static thing.
Okay, so
the design for the cloud is a JSON-y thing that.
No, I understand that, but
Right,
you've told me you had down here, you had these specific things here. So
Right.
what you said?
So highlighting, include highlighting.
No, I know, but I'm looking for the documentation notebook, and it's not. Highlighting. That's the difference. Sorry.
Yes.
Highlighted and highlighting. That's a bit obscure and not probably survivable.
It was the name you came up with the last time we discussed this, but
okay.
Names are always in flux until they release, and then even then sometimes.
Okay. All right. So then we've got concept here for what. Okay, so this says this thing is going to have certain kinds of highlighting. So for example, this might implicitly be wrapped around every element, every line, every point in a graphic. Yes?
Correct, which is what the list plot examples are doing in cloud. List plot is via the default setting for the include highlighting option, sort of sneaking in this wrapper as if it were literally present.
Okay. All right. So you've got. Okay. So what the heck is this?
So
it should be sticky. Okay, so these are features of the highlighting. So you're suggesting there's some kind of hysteresis type thing that you hit it once and it always stays on.
Mm-hmm. As a possible feature, so that it's a click/tap thing instead of a mouse over type thing.
And how do you turn it off?
Click again.
I see. Okay.
So for example, this is what the sectors in pie chart do when they pop in and out. Is they maintain a little bit of state on whether that effect is active at the moment.
Is that queryable by a program? I mean, isn't it? One would expect that to be some kind of dynamic, some kind of dynamic variable. Is it?
It is.
Okay, but it's an internal one right now.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's a dynamic variable that lives inside that graphic.
Right, as a dynamic module of some kind.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so all right.
And so coming from the top, we have sort of basic settings are you're giving essentially a style. In which case that is the highlight style when you mouse over the element or trigger the element.
So, but that will be similar to, I mean, with mouse over, we've clearly got, that's a bad example, but I mean, that's what mouse over is effectively doing.
Correct.
Except that what this is doing is it's saying that you want to add a style to that object, which would, if it was so effectively what that's doing is it's like a function version of mouse over where it says style of hash comma blah.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And this is exactly what, if we look at the parallel axis plot example again. So it is using a front end, somewhat carefully constructed front end construct so that there's 100 lines there. There's 100 line primitives. And there's only 100 line primitives. So we aren't duplicating the actual primitive. We're managing to just swap in the additional style.
Right. We have all kinds of good comments and questions on the live stream here, but one that just came in is how do you do this one with the touch screen? I guess what you do is the same as I was showing with those molecules. I mean, would this work right now if I pulled up this file in the cloud? Would it work?
I mean, so parallel axis plot gets bitmapped.
This is a. If I did this in the cloud app,
I'm not sure. I haven't tried it on the cloud app. It's an interesting question.
I think it's just disabled.
Yeah, but again.
Well, I mean, and there's the question of the cloud app versus the player app.
The browser. Well, cloud app versus a browser versus the player. But I mean, what do we want this to do? Presumably, with touch, in this particular case, because it is an extended object, touch is a perfectly fine, like the molecules, is a perfectly fine thing to do. I'm touching here. I got my great big finger at this position here, but still there's a big tail to the animal, which you can see outside of the location of your finger. I mean, the problem with a tooltip with your finger is you've got your finger there. Right?
That's a good point. I mean, the other problem with your finger is it's a much larger hit area than your mouse pointer.
Well, right. So it's a, in our theory of highlighting, so to speak, we've got sort of we seem to have two kinds of things. We have the point, the zero-dimensional mouse pointer, and we have the kind of the Gaussian blob of your finger.
Mm-hmm.
Both of which are things we need to consider, I think. But I think clearly highlighting a single point in see, even one of these things, this is perfectly viable. If there's a crosshair, it's perfectly reasonable to use your finger for hover for the crosshair.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, especially that one where it's only tracking the X position and it doesn't care what the Y value is.
Well, but either way, I mean, if I put my finger here, even though I can't see the thing that I'm putting my finger on, which is kind of annoying, I can still see the things that it goes to on the axes. Now, the statement I can't see what's on under my finger, one mechanism that's used in some apps, and that's why we should have had people from UX here, is that you have some kind of magnifying glass which shows you sort of displaced from your finger what is under there.
Mm-hmm. Like we have for the image inspector.
Indeed. I mean, if I take that, let's see, how do I get a nice image? I want an image of what's a good animal? Lion.
Lemur.
Lemur would be better. I'm going to stick with lion because that's what I typed in. That's a very small lion. Okay. Okay, there we go. So now
I wonder why it came out so small.
Yeah, I wonder why it came out so small too. Okay, so now what you're saying is if I go to, is it the selection tool?
Is it the pixel one?
Yeah, there we go. Right, so that's a good offset. That's a good example of something which we could do for touch. I don't think it would be a crazy thing to do for touch for one-dimensional objects, right? Because, zero-dimensional objects. But for one-dimensional objects, there's no reason to do this.
And that very might well then cover up the rest of the thing that you're trying to look at.
Well, I don't know. It wouldn't cover up the crosshairs. Look at this one. This is often a quadrant where it's not going to cover crosshairs.
Well, no, what I mean is that if you had a one-dimensional thing, so you had a curve that was going from the northwest to the southeast, or that was, zooming around all over the place, that something like that would potentially obscure more than it showed.
No doubt. Right. But I think we're not talking about that. I mean, we're saying for the case of touch with a one-dimensional object like a curve, you just light up away from your finger.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, so the all right. So let's just look back at your. I mean, okay, so this is the appearance.
So these are sort of named appearances. It's essentially a collection of fine-grained things.
Yeah, but okay, so what's the general version of this? The general version of this is presumably a function applied to the graphics object that you are currently indicating. Look, there are two things. Okay. You touch somewhere. Something has now been touched. It might be a line, it might be 3 lines, it might be a point, it might be a bunch of other things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Once touched, what does it do? It jumps up and flaps its arms around and turns green or something. Right? In other words, a function is applied to it. So you have found that graphics primitive. Somehow you are touching that graphics primitive. And now you say what's going to happen to that graphics primitive. So first question is, which graphics primitives are you touching? Second question, what do they do when you touch them? Now, actually, there's a third point, which is it's not just a question of touching the graphics primitives, it's a question of where you touch them. So for example, in the case of a line, it can matter that I'm going over here and that's the line. Boy, this is complicated. Because I don't think we can factor it into what did you touch and what does it do. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, right, because in this case, Roger, do you have any thoughts about this?
I think that the function applied to a whole graphics thing is complicated.
I was going to say, I mean, I like having function forms of things as much as the next.
No. I don't think you were. Were you? Look.
No, I understand what you were saying.
We've got several different things. Okay.
Yeah.
You are touching this graphic somewhere, right? What elements of the graphic care about you doing that? Like for example, here, if I'm here, right? The points over on this side, they just don't care. They're not being activated. They're not being tickled by what I'm doing. Do you see what I'm saying? So first question is, which things, like for instance here, or wherever you have one which has, where do you have one which is lighting up a whole line?
I don't think I included anywhere it's lighting up the whole line.
Okay, well, so we know in the case of something like this, we're lighting up the whole line, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, so, but the question of what doesn't care about what you're doing, right? It could be that as soon as we touch here, everything lights up, right? So the first question is, what's the selection of what cares about the fact that you're touching in the position you're touching? So we can think about that in a couple of different ways. We can think about the place where you're touching kind of radiating a field outwards, or we can think about and then seeing what does it. I just don't quite know how to think about it. Whether it's better to attach an I'm being touched, indication to a particular element of the graphic, or whether it's better to start from the toucher, so to speak, and sort of radiate some field outwards. Do you see what I'm saying?
I think my answer is that those are both good things and they are separate things.
Okay.
And I mean, and this is what the cloud examples have. For example, where for some of those, where it's using what I'm calling the ball highlighter, it's highlighting the thing that you're touching. For the ones where it's the slice highlighter, it is radiating out in the examples in the notebook in a vertical direction.
All right, so you have yet a third concept, okay? Your concept is you have a certain highlighting tool, a slice, a ball, whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
And that tool, I see, it's your kind of hyperfinger in some sense, or your hyper mouse, in the sense that instead of it being just a single point with the mouse, as soon as you're using the slice tool, you have extended what your, you've extended your mousiness, so to speak, to that whole, one-dimensional line.
Mm-hmm. Right. And if you look at the trading chart example, it's even going across the different panels.
I know. Yeah, I know.
I mean, one thing that I did before was did thought experiments. Like, what if this was in 3D? Then we would have drop planes, for instance, instead of drop lines.
Yep.
So things generalize in some ways, but then there might be, like in this case, you only drop down by one dimension, but you might want to drop down by 2 dimensions in 3D, down to a point.
Yeah. I wasn't going to bring up the 3D stuff yet, because I think we still don't have the right calculus for the 2D case. Of, one thing to do is think about it in terms, okay, so we've got these different things. A generalized notion of touching with what does that do to an object? You're proposing a different theory in which the touching device is itself a non-trivial thing. The hyper mouse is a vertical slicer, for example.
I mean, it in some ways, it almost sort of reminds me of, like, with a 3D graphic, how you hold down the modifier keys and it changes what the mouse click behavior is.
So, I don't think that's right. I don't think you have the right kind of model here. I mean, look, I think, one model is you've got slicers and pointers, which are basically the one-dimensional case and the zero-dimensional case. You could also have potentially a two-dimensional, you could have the large circle. You could have something, I could imagine something, it's not necessarily a good idea, where when I touch here, a whole circle of stuff within some radius lights up. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like a magnifier.
Yeah, kind of like a magnifier, maybe, except the magnifier will displace the objects, but it will be like a it's like a highlighter, really. Yeah. I mean, like a one of those yellow highlighting pens. You don't highlight with a highlighter pen. You're highlighting regions, not, it's unlikely that you would notice a highlighted point. So
now the other thing, here's to just confuse you, but it's super, super powerful. The best way I know to highlight is to de-highlight. It's the same effects. Some people sort of shout louder to emphasize their point. Some people go lower. And so de-highlighting is very efficient.
Well, I don't know what that, I mean, it only works if it's dynamic.
I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, if it's de-highlighted and it's disappeared, then you just don't know it's there. But if you are...
No, I mean, it doesn't have to go way all the way. It can just, be... Like, let's say that you were on that curve that you're on there right now. Let's say that all the other ones went gray. Lighter gray.
Yeah, okay, fine. Yes, that's a good point. Right. Okay. So okay, so I understand what you're saying. So that's a global... That's not.
So, for instance, for graphs, we use, de-highlighting is probably the most effective way of highlighting.
Right. Okay, let's come back to this for a second. I'm telling you, we need some kind of, I mean, this is kind of like the model view controller of highlighting or something. Yeah. It's like, how do you factor these different pieces so that we can understand what's going on? I mean, what you've got here.
How flexible do you want to be with a model? That's the question.
I don't know. And I mean, it could be that in the end, once we have the model, there are only 5 cases anybody cares about, and we just give them names. right? But I want to understand whether there is a model, because that way, if we have such a model, then when we have geo-region value plot or something, we can expect that we can immediately generalize to that. Let's look at some of the comments on our live stream, and then I feel like we have the wrong people in this meeting. We should have had UX people. We should have had graphic design people.
Okay.
Not the right meeting. But let's take a look at some of these comments, and then let's schedule another one of these. I mean, we've now introduced this thing. I'm impressed by what I'm seeing in the cloud there, particularly. Well done on that. Okay, let's see. Sander is commenting, snapping to points, being able to read the coordinates would be good. Yes, but I mean that relates to a thing that you might want, which I don't think you have here, which I think is an obvious thing, is a flag. So it's essentially a tooltip, which might be content related to this point, like it might be that in a feature space plot. By the way, Brett, did you get my mail again?
I looked at it. I think it's a simple bug.
It's a bug?
I think so.
Oh, for goodness sake. Well, see if you can fix it.
Yep.
It's super annoying. And machine learning claims they've reported it multiple times, and they feel it.
I looked at the bug reports last night, and I didn't see anything that looked like what I was seeing as a bug.
Okay, fine. But I mean, what we're talking about is that in a feature space plot, you should be able to say, thing arrow red, thing arrow green, etc. And those reds and greens should be the ways that the things are rendered in the feature space plot, correct?
Yes.
Okay, but that's not happening right now.
That's not what you were doing. I mean, it's not what that example was doing. So maybe there was an example that you tried that
just
wasn't
didn't work at all. No. Look. What I'm saying is, you've got feature space plot. Look, I mean that we can do a simple example here. Okay, so let's say we say table I goes to red, I goes to 10, 20, let's say. And then join that with table. Don't you love this? Oh no, why didn't that work? Why didn't that work? Okay, that's something again.
Is it the type through fail?
It's a type through fail. This should work. This case should work. This case, is anybody, or am I sending this message? I'm sending this message. This is a special case. The case of the end of the line like that is, oh, this is amusing. My mouse has turned to nothing. Okay.
I was gonna say we can see it.
Okay, well,
or at least some of the time. I don't.
Okay. In any case, this here. Okay, fine. Now I take that and I say feature space plot. And that worked. So why didn't it work? I did the same thing with molecules there.
Right. So it didn't know how to auto render molecules.
I know, but here the whole point is the right-hand side is telling it how to render it, right?
Right.
Supposed to be. But it didn't work with molecules. So if I say, control equals, I don't know, let's actually just do this. Let's say random entity chemical 20. Okay, and now I say molecule of that. Oh, for goodness sake. Why is this so slow? And this is not dealing with polymers correctly. Okay, this is super painful. Okay, in any case, here we go with some molecules. And what I was trying to do here, let me, is I said molecule, arrow, red, for example, thread, this thing. Oh. Okay, and then I'm going to pick a few other molecules here. And I'm going to say, you see what I'm doing here?
Mm-hmm. And then flatten the whole thing and feature space plot it.
Okay, failed.
What? Okay. That is interesting.
Okay, so you think it's a bug?
I
If
think
it's a bug,
that's,
then just go fix it.
yeah.
Okay, so that's the thing that I'm reporting, right?
Right.
It's supposed to be the case that the right-hand side gives you the rendering, and it should give you the rendering even if you've given explicit right-hand sides, it should be a lot laxer in when it decides to abandon rendering the objects. Do you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because when it gets too big, it's going to stop, showing all the little images or whatever else. But I think if you've given an explicit right-hand side, and by the way, if the right-hand side is like a color, then you should notice that and you should keep rendering forever, because a color is a zero-dimensional thing and you'll never run out of space, so to speak.
Right. Yes.
So that's another thing that should get taken care of. Anyway, and the completely separate thing having nothing to do with you, but the feature extractors for molecules are doing crazy things. I don't know. I mean, we've just added a lot of fancy feature extractors for molecules that should place them. So, I mean, maybe it's just I don't know my molecules well enough, but I thought I was trying different classes of molecules that should have been separated, but they were somewhat separated. Okay. Other
Anyway,
comments?
back to comments.
Points which show the Y value. So I mean, I agree that in cases like this, being able to actually displaying the values here would be very nice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like some of our other graphics things. There's a question of, when does it get too much? When does it get, why I resized it? Okay. When does it get to be too noisy and too annoying? And, I just wanted to trace these curves and I didn't want to see these numbers to 7 digits and so on.
Right.
I also would like to comment that those numbers, like tick labels, need to have the ability to say pi over 3 and things like this. See what I'm saying? That the absolute position on the plot may not be good enough. And for example, for date list plot, you're going to need the date displayed.
Right. Yeah,
okay.
I mean, I think one common approach. I mean, and this is another axis essentially is sort of where does that label get placed? Is it there at the mouse thing? Is it along the projected onto the axis? Is it projected to the edge of the graphic?
I'm sorry, which thing? A thing like a coordinate or something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. I mean, you could have something where there is simply a little counter here that gives you the coordinate values, or you could have something that's hanging like a flag off the actual point, or you could have something that's at the ends of the crosshair.
Right.
All of those are not unreasonable. There's a comment from Ali here about show becoming slow with multiple mesh objects. I think we have the wrong set of people here to discuss that. An example. Go ahead. Roger, do you want to say something about that? Roger?
Like he's not here anymore.
He may have had an appointment at 5 or after 5.
You know what, guys? Don't set up meetings like this with the wrong people in them, please.
But yeah, I can't say anything about show and mesh objects. So.
Okay. Sandra is asking about a scaled 0.1 for snapping. Horizontal closest, vertical closest, distance closest. Yeah, right. I mean, there's a snapping distance for, so that's another, that's a question of, is it associated with the object or with the toucher, so to speak? For example, an object could say, this is another case, something could say, I'm a very important object in the graphic. Let me get excited by touches that are even far away. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a waiting for, well, so the basic claim is it takes, two to kind of activate. That is the toucher and the touched, so to speak. The thing that is, the pointer, whatever it is, and the thing that the pointer is pointing to. And that somehow we need some sort of calculus of how, of what the pointer points at and what lets itself be pointed at.
Right, because I mean, there are certainly cases where, you may have elements that you want to be completely immune to interactions. That you're trying to draw.
Well, that's a good point too. So that's a never point at me thing.
I'm invisible to you.
Right. Right. That's a good point. Now, is I hope somebody is taking notes here.
It's recorded. So
okay, some project manager is actually going to go through this. The project manager.
I'm also taking notes.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Person
I forgot we had Andrea.
Well, that's good. Okay, let's see. Lots more comments here. How does highlighting work with tooltips?
I didn't include it with any of the examples, but they're mostly orthogonal things. Up until the point where we get into the things where the highlighter is trying to show textual labels or the little zoom off to the corner type
right
thing.
That's going to be a mess. If the highlighter, right, what is the difference between a tooltip and a flagged highlighting, so to speak? Analogous to the thing we had there with our how did I get this again? Oh, was it this? Yes, there we go. This thing, right?
Right.
But one feature of this is a from the graphic interpretation, so to speak. It is not a separate piece of information added. A tooltip is separate metadata that's been added at some particular position, whereas this is merely a magnification of the graphic that is already there. So I think that's the difference in concept between highlighting and tooltipping. Right? Tooltipping is adding new information. Highlighting is simply doing something generic. It's like a function, the highlighting function, which is applied to different inputs. Whereas tooltipping generally is every tooltip has to be defined on its own. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Something like date would fall outside of that framework, right? Like the graphic itself doesn't know anything. It doesn't have a concept of dates. But you would want to.
Well, no, that's not correct, because the graphic knows absolute times, and the translation from absolute times, which is the coordinate position, to the displayed date is merely a function that is independent of position.
Sure. So it doesn't have to be encoded directly in the graphic. It's something that a function could
fixed function that can take what's in the graphic and transform to what you see. Whereas a tooltip, for every point in the graphic, needs new information to say what it does.
Sure.
So I think that's the way to think about those. Okay, Craig is saying use attached cell to pick the highlighting. That's a good idea. Yeah, it's a reasonable idea.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting idea. And particularly being able to, the problem is it's going to get very complicated very quickly. And, we're going to have to define, and probably it'll be in the plot theme, which of several highlighting schemes will be the obvious ones to pick up for a particular graphic.
Yeah, and themes is one of the places where, I mean, that absolutely, should, I mean, we'll need highlighting themes, basically feature themes, including static.
No, I understand. Right. I mean, that's a feature like for, I think we're going to redo these plot themes to somewhat different names, but the ones that are for, publications of various kinds, it's not going to be, the Dead Tree Journal doesn't get to have interactive whatevers in its graphics.
I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, because everybody does their puts their PDFs on preprint servers, and PDF may still have some things that might be interesting. I mean, in terms of being able to maybe turn things.
I've never ever seen that work. Maybe other people have. Maybe I just don't read enough academic things. But I've literally never seen an active PDF that does anything beyond light up its hyperlinks on preprint servers.
I mean, quite possibly.
No, I know it's possible, but I'm just.
Well, no, I mean, PDF is a rich language, but that doesn't mean that everybody, or maybe anybody outside of Adobe or whatever uses the full extent of it.
Indeed. I could tell the story about the bug in PDF that we found when we were printing the NKS book in 2002. If you haven't heard that story, it's a good story. Which involved some holiday weekend that involved me getting hold of, I think it was John Warnock, who was like, and getting hold of the people who'd produced some direct-to-plate printing device. And it was a bug in PostScript. It had been there for 10 years. It was a bug in the image operator, and nobody had ever tried to do this. It was a bug that you saw in cellular automata type images, but not in photograph type images. Anyway, it's too long a story for right now. Comment from Watt. There could be handles that appear at the end of crosshairs to allow altering. Boy, I don't know. I don't know how you get there.
That's what I was just thinking. That the crosshairs are so ephemeral that trying to.
Well, that's another issue, right? There's another issue, which is you could imagine a right click that locks the crosshairs. Let's imagine you want to compare multiple points in a graphic. Having a right click to lock different, to leave kind of crosshair droppings all over the graphic might be very useful.
This reminds me a little bit of like the support lines you see on stock charts sometimes, where they draw a line under with a particular slope under some section of the curve of their stock charts.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, also right. Okay, let's see.
That would be a good thing for mobile too. You scroll and then you pick scroll, pick your finger up, even, and then the drop line stays there. You can see it without your finger blocking.
That's true, but how would you get that? I mean, you could do a hard press, another one of those things that hasn't really caught on.
Or you could just have that be the default. Like as soon as you start, before you interact with the graphic, there's no drop lines. Then as soon as you touch the graphic, then drop lines appear, and then they're just.
I don't think that will work.
How do you clear them?
Maybe tap again or tap away from it.
Yeah, I don't think that will work.
And then it drops a different crosshair.
Yes, right. If you missed, it will drop a different one. No, I mean, does hard press work for anything other than maybe variant keyboard type stuff? Or long press or whatever it is? What is that thing anyway?
You use it for copy paste on iOS.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay.
And I think in the Wolfram Player app, in the file view, it changes from open to select.
Okay. Let's see. Sanders says could be plot legends showing the values. Yeah, I mean, I think
that's all. I mean, I was going to say that introduces a whole nother set of interactions, which is sort of distance from afar.
Well, right. But I mean, yes, right. That's a different thing. You mouse over the plot legend, it lights up that curve.
Mm-hmm.
Or in a more extreme case, you've got a density plot with a legend that shows different colors. And as you go to that position in the color scale, it lights up some region inside the density plot.
I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that.
Well, it's also unclear what range of values it should light up. It can depend on how thick your finger is or something at that point. Never mind. Okay. Let's see, Marco. Right. You have a highlight features of a plot with system of coordinates and step the closest by selecting some metric. Oh boy, that's an interesting idea. Okay.
Say that
again. Marco is suggesting you could also have gestures to, for example, select a line instead of a single point.
So like you move over the line and it shows a point, but then you start to follow the line and it shows the whole line?
Yeah, I think the idea would be, I mean, that's the thing we have not discussed, is the possibility of gestures extruding, for example, just as we talked about a point-wise, toucher, you could have a line-wise toucher that you get by essentially putting your finger or the mouse down somewhere and moving. I don't know if this would work. I mean, you could imagine a thing where it indicates this, and then you're moving sideways. I don't know. I mean, where there's some gesture that generates a larger,
generating your interaction region around the mouse.
Possibly, yes. All right, Craig here. Shouldn't highlighting accept a distance function for nearest? Yeah. Yes, well, that's what we're talking about here. Yeah, we could compile the distance function and we could do that. I agree.
Right. I mean, the thing is that you don't necessarily want the distance function to be in the graphic coordinate system. I mean, it wants to be, I think in most cases, in, like a points.
Well, that's an interesting question in its own right. In 3D, it's going to get much more complicated with that.
Mm-hmm.
But in 2D, is it the case? You're claiming it's always in the screen coordinate system. That's all you ever care about.
I'm claiming that that's what you will 99% of the time want. That if it's an actual distance function in Cartesian space, that.
Okay, so let me horrify you for a second. Remember axes objects that we're just putting in, right?
Never heard of them.
I think you've done them a lot. Okay, so an axis object, and the fact that you can have spiral axis objects, for example, strongly suggests that you should be able to have spiral crosshairs too. In other words, what we're looking at is not polar plots. Where should the crosshairs go on a polar plot?
I mean, they should probably. Well, okay. I mean, in general, polar plot has access to both worlds.
I know, but should there be radial? Should there be radial crosshairs in a polar plot? I think there's a good argument for that. As you go round, radar plot, for example, let's say that's an example of a, you don't really want rectilinear crosshairs on a radar plot. I mean, imagine rectilinear crosshairs on a pie chart. They're pretty stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine
or when we add ternary plots.
Well, yes,
your crosshairs are going to be little 3-directioned things. Right,
but imagine think about the case of a pie chart where there's really a lot of pie wedges in the pie chart. Okay, so let's imagine that we say, pie chart range of 50 or something. Okay, so over here, well, actually, look at that. You've got you've got basically radial crosshair lines there.
I mean, yeah, there's edges on the sectors, but yeah.
I know there are edges on the sectors, but I mean, if you were doing something where you were flagging characteristics of each sector, you would want radial lines going out here within each sector somehow. Not quite sure, but this is, so I think in a sense, there should be, from what we've learnt from axes. By the way, it really is confusing to me that those drop lines effectively don't come up when you're in the white space above here. I just find that really confusing. I just think it should drop down to this by default. I think it's too fragile. That it's like, oh, how far away can I go? Well, I can go that distance away. Steve is commenting, should be able to click the graph and get a cell added with the snapped XY values. Yes. Well, that's a question of a right-click menu that gives you the coordinates, and we should have that. I mean, just like we have that in, drawing.
We have it. It's just nobody, it's not exposed well enough, and that comes back to UX stuff. But
I think one thing we don't have, which is kind of crazy that we don't have, is if I say, if I do this, why don't we have something? It says double click to edit, but why not? Oh, look at that. We have get coordinates, and I didn't even know it. There it is, get coordinates. No, where does it put the coordinates?
Okay, so it didn't actually get the coordinates, I think.
What does it do?
You get coordinates. And now move back over the graphic. And now if you click, it's going to drop a point. And now you can Command C, Command V out of the graphic. Command C, move out of the graphic.
Why does it say get coordinates if that's not what it's doing?
To be honest, I didn't know that it was. I didn't know that it was in that menu.
Yes, I didn't know it was there either. It seems wrong. That would be more like show coordinates. I have a feeling that it got into that menu as some kind of transfer from some other menu where it does actually mean this. That's a thing.
I doubt it, because I think the functionality in graphics, as I've always known it, since version 6, is I get to it through touching, hitting period with the graphic selected, and then doing the selecting and then copy.
Well, anyway, this is something for Noah, for Andrea. That this is a thing to tell him about, because he's been the one working on drawing tools. Anyway, that seems like a good thing to be able to do. Shift drag to zoom within the plot. Yeah, we're very well aware of that issue, and I don't know what is that part of that. That's not really part of.
I don't think that's quite part of this. Although it touches on sort of the multi-touch side of things again, because that's a common.
Sandra is commenting the snapping distance, viewing distance, or coordinate distance. Yeah, well, that's the point we're talking about, and whether you want polar coordinates and so on, which I'm claiming you do eventually.
I think for sure you do eventually want polar, and you want the appropriate thing for ternary, and probably appropriate things for geographics, that it's tracing out latitude and longitude in some weird projection.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we'll need to do that. Right. The lines should not be straight lines. That'll be completely stupid on the Earth. In a projection, yes, that'll be completely stupid. They have to be that long lines. Okay. Ali is commenting about 3D graphics. There's been a bunch of under the hood changes, which actually I'm wondering if we're even remembered to include in the 12.3 new in stuff. There's a bunch of changes to do with on different platforms. It's very platform dependent, and it depends what platform you're on. What's happening? I think there are some new changes on Windows particularly. Okay.
Right. Windows got its drawing layers, took a big step forward in terms of what we're using.
Right. Okay.
I don't remember if I saw it in your
Ali is asking,
draft.
can 3D graphics be temporarily downsampled so rotation and movement is more fluid? That's obviously what happens in the cloud And that's a good question. That's a good question. We've never done that for the desktop. That's a good question.
I mean, I think, there were suggestions around, V6 era that we could do this, and I forget who was opposed.
Well,
but
it shouldn't be necessary. And
exactly. Ideally, it wouldn't be necessary, but I mean, for a complicated enough graphic, I mean, it can be. I mean, there's times where, even the cloud version of I'm just going to show you the box and no contents,
right,
would be a better user experience than.
Well, that's what we did in version 1.
Well, what do you mean you did in version 1?
That just showed the box for 3D graphics. We had a thing which was where you just rotated the box, and when you pressed go, it re-rendered the graphic with that viewpoint. It was a viewpoint selector.
I thought rotating 3D graphics was new in 6. That there was what was it, like the real-time 3D package prior to that?
No. That had been from version 1. There was a thing where you could effectively pick your viewpoint by taking something which was a pure box with nothing in it and rotating the box to the angle you wanted, and then pressing go, and it would re-render the graphic.
Oh, maybe I do remember this. It's been a few years.
Indeed. I haven't thought about that in 30-something years, so it's good that Neuron is still alive. Okay, I need to run off here. Let's see.
Okay.
The comment from Arc here. With a mouse, single click selects the graphic, double click fixes the crosshairs. Double click, but you have to hold and drag. The second click extends the highlight area. That's interesting. There's a whole language we could make for that. That's an interesting point. The double click can do something different.
I mean, double click already does something different because it starts selecting the contents. And so if double click, did different things depending on whether you hit white space or not, that might be.
And Steve is asking about coordinates for maps. And I don't know what it does. What does it do in geographics? Does it correctly get the lat long?
Yes. You get lat long in 2 different forms, and you get the grid position in sort of what the raw underlying coordinate system is.
What am I about to get here? Why is this so slow? Okay. So you're saying if I do my get coordinates here, oh, look at that. Lat long, amazing.
It's what, like in decimal and DMS forms, and then you get X and Y as the projected coordinate system. Yeah, the geogrid position.
Cool. That's cool. And so I can select those points and I can say Command C, and what do I get now?
A geoposition, or I guess a bunch of geopositions.
Oh, wow. Huh. Very nice. We should advertise that feature. I didn't know that worked. Okay. All right. Well, please schedule another one of these with the right people in it. And
okay.
Lots of very interesting stuff here. Thanks to you guys, and thanks to folks on the live stream. Lots of good comments. Much appreciated. All right. I've got to go off here.